This is an idea whose time should never come, because this is an idea which is so irresponsible in fiscal terms and is so typical of being, almost being bordering on being cynical, that you don't care at all for any norm, any prudential norm. You don't care anything that will happen to your credit rating agencies or to your debt to GDP ratio, but you just announce a scheme for the sake of winning elections, and as simple as the worst kind of voter politics that you can get. In fiscal terms, this one is a simple, completely political announcement, because even Arvind Subramaniam or Pranab Bardhan or Vijay Joshi, the original proposals of the UBI, had said that this should be implemented if and only if all other subsidies were removed. You cannot do this along with all other subsidies, and they had estimated that it will take up to 3 to 3.5% of GDP, which is a huge amount of money to be doling out year after year after year. Now, this is something that you cannot have over and above all the existing subsidies, because therefore, in the economics of it, this is going to be about between 10 to 12% of your budget. It will be about 3 to 3.5% of your GDP. You don't know how you will get the numbers how you will identify the poorest 20%, of the households, as to what data will be used. You don't know how many people within the household you will include, whether you will include the 2 adults or you will include all the 5 members of the family that on average makes for an Indian household. You've done nothing. Not only have you not estimated the fiscal cost of this, the huge fiscal cost of the scheme. Yes, you are absolutely right, and 1.9% is a sheer underestimate. It will probably bump up the fiscal deficit from 3.5 to about to more than 6%. This is exactly what Mr. Chidambaram did in 2008, when he let the fiscal deficit rip from 2.5 to 6%. Actually, this is typical Congress philandering, this is just typical Congress, spreading the largest ground. The biggest danger here, Rahul, is that your credit rating agencies, when they see the debt to GDP ratio rising so enormously as a result of higher government borrowing, will downgrade your rating to nearly junk status, and that will hugely impact the cost of borrowing, not just for the government but for the private sector as well, and that will have a negative impact on the investment activity in this country. So what you will do in one stroke is that you will stop investments from happening, you will create a disincentive for work, you will create a huge amount of inefficiency in the system, because you would not know how to handle this huge this basic scheme that you've got. Plus, you will create a situation where in future everybody who there will be a competition, there will be a race to the bottom for making more and more extravagant populist promises to going forward in every election. We will be in a downward spiral for our democracy instead of an upward spiral of getting the democratic dividend that we are trying to get. On the second one, that's exactly what Rahul have said. There is no means, there is no way to identify the 20% of the poor, and then these 20% will continue to change year after year. But this is also, in addition, the greatest admission of failure of your economic policy and of your economic thinking, because implementing this scheme basically implicitly says that we will never be able to improve inclusion in our system, we will never be able to deliver public services efficiently. Therefore, we are going to monetize everything and put it in this one universal basic income. And as you rightly said, that there cannot be any way in which you will remove the existing subsidy. So this will come on top of it, which is why it is such a cynical announcement. And that's the only word I can use, because you know that this is going to bust all your fiscal norms, that this is going to create a bit of a complete sort of chaos, as it were, in economic terms, and yet you announce this simply with an eye to the election results. Well, you see, that scheme had been fiscally examined. The impact of that has been carefully studied. The farmers' distress is something quite different from the rest of the population. And also, if you notice, that scheme is meant for only the small and marginal farmer, which are well recognized, which are well identified, and therefore implementable. So, the two schemes are not at all at par with each other. The fact is that by implementing this scheme, what you are saying is that, look, we cannot have growth which will be inclusive. We cannot have government schemes which can include and benefit the bottom of the pyramid people, the last in the line, and therefore we'll just announce one big largest, whatever be the fiscal consequences of that, doesn't matter. You know, Rahul, the point is that Finland, with I think nearly $40,000 per capita income, Canada with even higher per capita income, you know, if they are considering it, can we compare ourselves with them with $2,000 per capita, $2,500 per capita income? The second thing is, yes, maybe the time will come in future, but at the moment we want to incentivize and encourage work. We want to incentivize and encourage employment and not encourage a social safety net that will just take people out of the workforce, by promising them this dole, forever and ever to come. So I have always been opposed to this scheme, and I think countries like China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they have all succeeded without it. Singapore has done wonderfully well. So I don't think we should be an outlier from our Asian context, where this scheme has not been ever implemented, not even been thought about. And I think to that extent, but given the fiscal impact of this scheme on your budget, on your credit rating agencies, on the impact that it will have on raising the interest rates and therefore stopping investment in its mid-track, I think should all be considered, and Mr. Rahul Gandhi should be told that he is doing a grave injustice to the economic stability of this country by having announced this scheme. The point is that, can you imagine that a family getting 6,000 rupees a month, being able to, because of that, being able to get better quality education for their children? Could you imagine them getting the right kind of medical help they need from this basic support you're giving? Yes, you are right that this sort of schemes become attractive because you think that they are replacement, they're going to replace jobs, but that's just a mirage. Because they don't, because you have to, the aim of all economic activity and all economic policy making should be to empower people by giving them employment. This government has tried very hard to generate the maximum employment that it can, and you've seen the EPFO numbers and the other numbers that have come out. And in future, these suggestions, absolutely right. Absolutely right, Rahul. You are absolutely right. I completely agree with you. And you will, inshallah, see us rolling out the sort of schemes on the ground that will increase employment intensity of our growth, that will generate the sort of modern agriculture, that will modernize our agriculture and raise farmers' incomes, not just production and not just output, that will encourage agro-processing. We will come up with a whole plan of action which will make economic growth and inclusive economic growth a reality for the next 5 years, and I'm sure that with those schemes in place, you will not need populist sops and schemes which will make our country go back a number of years rather than go forward.